So let's just go over the difference between puberty blockers and hormone therapy.
Okay. So puberty blockers are medications that they're otherwise known as gonadotrophin releasing hormone analogues. And what they do is act on the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland and block the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So there's a very medical explanation for essentially blocking the pathway that allows the body to produce estrogen or testosterone. And regardless of whether you're assigned female or male at birth, these medications act in the same way on the brain and ultimately stop the testes from producing testosterone or the ovaries from producing estrogen. And when a young person is started on puberty blockers, usually given by intramuscular injection or a subcutaneous implant, depending on the type of blocker you're using, what it does is essentially suppress these hormones, which allows the body to continue to grow and develop in all other ways. They grow taller, they put on weight, they continue to do well or at the same level, I should say, academically and cognitively, but they don't develop the secondary sexual characteristics of, for those assigned female at birth, they don't develop breasts, for example, they don't start to menstruate. For those who are assigned male at birth, being on puberty blockers stops their voice deepening, stops them growing facial hair, and stops the changes associated with masculinization of the jaw and face. And they can continue to as I said, to grow up without those physical changes in the body. And what we see with puberty blockers very often when a young person has come into us expressing a huge amount of distress with development of their secondary sexual characteristics, that starting on the blockers almost instantaneously reduces that anxiety and allows them to function in a way that enables them to attend school, for example, and concentrate on learning, and enables them to function in the home environment without being so distressed. They're happier and they're happier. Their mental health is better. With hormone treatment, in terms of gender-affirming hormone treatment, we use testosterone for those who have a male gender identity, and testosterone induces masculinization. So for that, you see a deepening of the voice, often within 6 to 8 weeks initially, and other changes that progress over a number of years. So changes in jaw and facial structure to be more masculine, facial hair, body hair, and also sort of increase in muscularity of the body and changes in fat redistribution. So instead of putting fat, for example, on the hips and the bottom, as one would being assigned female at birth, with testosterone, you tend to have a narrowing of the fat in those areas. And if they do put on weight, it tends to be on the abdomen. So you get a masculine overall appearance over many years. And with estrogen, what we see is the opposite. We have the feminization of the body with breast growth, widening of hips through fat redistribution, softening of the skin, softening of the facial features, and enabling them to, I guess, express themselves in a way that they feel fits with their inner sense of who they are. And with the physical changes, what we tend to see for the vast majority is an improvement in their mood, in their levels of anxiety, and their ability to kind of do well in life more broadly.
So a key difference between these two things is that puberty blockers are, if you decide to stop taking them, the puberty you were going to have naturally is just going to kick back in.
Yeah, that's right. So puberty
So
blockers.
it's more of a puberty delayer, really, than a blocker.
We refer to it medically as puberty suppression, because it suppresses puberty for a period of time. And if you do choose to come off puberty blockers, then you're right, your endogenous hormones kick in again, and the puberty that you would have experienced before happens a bit later on. And this is a really important point, Coleman, because with puberty blockers, sometimes what we see are young people who come in extraordinarily distressed and extraordinarily anxious, to the point that they can't speak about what's happening to their body and to them, and and their function in terms of their environment at home and at school is so poor because of this distress and anxiety, that often we offer to start the puberty blockers to allow them space to and the time to talk without a sense of urgency over a decision. I can give you an example. I look after a young person who came to see us when he was about 10, and he was really unsure of his gender, and he had a number of very feminine interests. He was very feminine in his expression generally, but he said, I'm not sure that I'm female. I think I'm male. I'm not sure. I really don't know. Maybe I'm non-binary. Maybe I'm not exclusively male or female. And he also had such severe anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder that his whole day was made up of rituals to try and control this anxiety. So we offered to put him on puberty blockers just so that he didn't have to make a decision so urgently. And it was really interesting to watch the anxiety. It took time, but it settled down. He stopped spending much of the day doing hand washing and checking things, which were part of his OCD symptomatology. And what we saw over time was him become much more comfortable with himself. And he, in the end, after about 3 years, said, I do feel very comfortable now that I'm male. I'm a very feminine male, not yet aware of potential kind of sexuality and identification in other ways. But he said, for my gender, I now feel much more comfortable, and I'm going to come off the blockers and go through male puberty. And this young person has gone from not being able to function at school to now, I heard actually just a couple of weeks ago that he's got a scholarship into year 11, which is our kind of last 2 years of high school, year 11 and 12. And he's been able to do so well academically. He's moved schools into somewhere where he's got a scholarship. So puberty blockers can work for trans people in suppressing puberty and allow a transition that enables them to express themselves in their trans identity. But they can also help young people by providing space to work through some of their concerns and to do so, I think, in a really humane way where they feel a sense of control that they wouldn't have otherwise had.
Yeah, this brings up an interesting point, which the more I've had conversations with people who either are trans and have transitioned or are cisgender but had struggled with some degree of gender dysphoria in their youth, I've come more and more to see gender dysphoria as a spectrum, or as something that comes in degrees, where you have some kids that from the moment they can speak are sure and just completely stable in the sense that they are assigned the wrong gender, and they sound the same way about it when they're 2 years old as they do when they're 15. And then you have people that just have a slight dose on the other end of the spectrum, a slight dose of discomfort with their gender that isn't ever going to materialize into anything worth intervening on. And then you have everything in between.
Yeah.
And so I think, part of the reason this conversation has been as sometimes needlessly sort of controversial as it is because we talk about gender dysphoria as something you just either have or you don't, which I think obscures really the messy reality of things for people.
Yeah. Oh, and I completely agree with you that this is a spectrum. And I think we started talking about how everyone has their own story. And I don't think I'll ever come across two young people and who are the same. And there is the classic narrative of the trans person who presents at age 3, who, as soon as they could speak, talked about their gender in a way that clearly identifies them as having a trans identity. And yet we have young people who first come to a realisation in puberty or first start to really think about their gender identity as adults. And you hear of people transitioning. We certainly in Australia have stories of people transitioning at 70 and 80 years of age that have experienced gender dysphoria and their own sense of who they are over time, may have needed their circumstances to be such that it did feel safe for them to transition. But there are people who are at each end of the spectrum, and then, as you say, everyone in the middle. And that nuance gets lost, I think, when the discussion about trans people is politicised, and when the controversy comes, it's often not controversy which is looking at nuance. It's the controversy of good and bad, black and white. People try and reduce it to that sort of debate, and I think that's where it gets dangerous for trans people.